All right, if everybody could take their seats, please. Capital Factory time, the plan is usually to say we're going to start at noon, but actually start at 12:15. But we're running on military time now, which means I've learned over the past week, things start on time. So we're going to start right on time. Awesome. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Josh Baer. I'm the founder of Capital Factory. Mayor, we got a seat for you right up here. It's my honor to welcome all of you here, and especially Lieutenant General Wesley, Mayor Adler, the rest of the Army team that's here with us today, and many of our other distinguished guests. Thanks for joining us. I've had the pleasure of getting to know them a bit over the past week, and I'm looking forward to all of you getting to learn a little bit more about them as well. Who's here at Capital Factory for the first time? Awesome. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here. Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs here in Texas. In this building, we have 3 floors with about 60,000 square feet, where thousands of entrepreneurs work every day, and over 100,000 people come together every year to help learn and share and teach each other about entrepreneurship and inspire them about innovation. Most people probably find out about it because they come to some event like this every day. There's events like this happening here besides this room. There's an event going on right behind that wall there. There's a classroom. They were complaining we were being too loud. There's other classrooms upstairs and other places where every day there's tons of other programs and activities going on. And for me, what I think is actually one of the coolest things about the programs that happen here is that most of them is the community coming in and doing them. They're grassroots things where nobody's getting paid to present, nobody's paying to attend, but it's people all helping and sharing and learning from each other. And then in particular, the summer's great. I love the summer because this place is full of kids. And there'll be like a 6th grade camp going on teaching robotics, or somebody else doing programming, or other things like that. And that's always a pleasure to see too. As people start to get serious about their startup, they can come work here. They can get a membership and be able to use our conference rooms and desks and facilities. And having space is an important part of that. But really, the reason they do that is because they're looking for people. They're looking for the people they need to help connect to move their startup forward. They're looking for co-founders. They're looking to hire their first employees. They're looking to find a mentor, someone that's kind of done this before that they can look up to and that can share with what they've learned. They're looking to find their first customer or their first investor. And all those things are so key and so important in the early stages of a company. That's what they're coming here looking for. And everybody here is working on technology and innovation and startups. So you really increase the likelihood that you'll bump into them. And then as they show traction and show that they really have something to work on, we have an accelerator program which we use to help get them access to all the best resources, and then we invest in those companies as well. And through that, we are the most active early stage tech investor in Texas, definitely over the past 5 or 6 years. And so we're investing in lots of the companies that are here, and then trying to help them plug into everything that's happening. So in addition to being a center of gravity for entrepreneurs, Austin, and more so Capital Factory now, is their center of gravity for defense innovation. And that all started, as I remember it, when Joseph Kopser and Craig Cummings, who's here with us today, came to town with Ride Scout, their last startup, which they ended up selling to Mercedes. And so not only did they bring all their military connections and resources here, which really sparked a lot of what we see here happening today, and we can kind of trace it back, but they also brought another big company to town, Mercedes, and they've been a great partner here at Capital Factory as well. Then the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, 2 years ago, launched the Austin DIUX unit here, Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, which is a DoD innovation unit that's been based here for quite a while. I know Zach and David are here from DIUX. And then just a month ago on this stage, we had Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, launching the new Austin AFWorks Air Force Innovation Unit here, which you also probably saw around the corner. And it seems like just about every week, we have another government agency or innovation unit coming through here looking at how they can plug into what's happening here in Austin in the ecosystem. So that's made an impact on the startups here already. Sensei, one of our startups here at Capital Factory, through this relationship, they build software that helps track actually the movements in your eye to literally read your mind. And they can use it for a lot of different applications. But they're right now doing a project with the Air Force, which you can probably see a demo of over there, which they found through being here at Capital Factory. And through that, they are now training the first generation of fighter pilots here in Austin at Austin Bergstrom. And they're doing it in half the time that it normally takes, which saves a lot of money. I mean, to think of every hour in an F-16 or F-35. And that's really was game-changing for them as a company. And then another example is a company called New Knowledge, which uses artificial intelligence to identify social media messages that are legitimate versus not legitimate, and which ones are being done maliciously to try to influence opinion, whether it's by bots or through other governments or other agencies. And obviously that's a big problem for companies and for governments alike. So this Futures Command thing, though, this is really a whole other scale and level than the other programs that we've seen so far. While we're really excited to have them here, this isn't one unit of the Army. This is the whole Army Innovation Unit. It's a really, really big deal. And also as part of that, it's the creation of a new 4-star general. And there are only a few 4-star generals and 4-star commands. And so that's something that literally takes an act of Congress to happen. There'll be 500 people based here in Austin, and this group controls the entire R&D budget for the Army, which is one of the biggest R&D budgets in the world. In addition to being able to bring great problems to the table, they've got money to go invest, to go make things happen, and to help create startups and catalyze them. So when they were coming here, they really put all of Austin through the ringer. We knew that we were on the list of finalist cities, but to be honest, Austin's kind of expects to be on the list of finalist cities these days. Like, we're on lots of lists of finalist cities. But then as they started to really engage, every time they came, they only gave us 24 hours notice that they were coming. So it was literally like, we're coming tomorrow. Everybody needs to be ready. And that was partly a big part because they wanted to see the real Austin. They wanted something authentic. They didn't want something that was overly produced or prepared. And they got it. They got to see the real Austin. The Austin Chamber is, as many of you probably realize, but they don't always get credit for, they're the ones that really drive a process like this. They're the ones that take point on organizing it and making it happen. Most of that happens under NDA, so we never hear about it. But for me, it was actually a really great opportunity to see how hard they work. Because at the startups, we all like to brag about how we pull all-nighters and do all these things to make all these things happen. But the chamber was pulling all-nighters to make this happen over and over again. And it definitely would not have happened without their help. So we're really lucky to have a great chamber here. In addition, Governor Abbott and his office were also really critical in pulling all this together. He made time with Undersecretary McCarthy and General Wesley when they were here to meet with them, and really pulled some other magic together to get this over the finish line. So that was really appreciated as well. And then finally, the UT system and Board of Regents were critical in making this happen too. And as they recently may have read in the paper, the command will be based just a few blocks away at the UT system, so 2 blocks from here, which is close enough for them to ride a bird scooter over here. So who here has been to one of my Intro to the Austin Startup Scene talks? Anybody been to one of those? A bunch of you? So I do a talk once a month. It's always, this one's the second Tuesday of the month. And it's for people that are new to Austin or want to be, or new to the startup scene. They want to plug into things. And in that talk, I always talk about the MCC project, the Microelectronics and Computer Technology Corporation, which now you probably best recognize as the West Pickle Research Center up near the Domain as part of UT campus. But I always point to that as one of the foundational times, one of those foundational points that really helps establish the scene for the tech community that we have here today. And everybody that I talk to points back to that one moment as being a real catalyst, as something that really kicked things off. And from everything I've learned about this, I really believe that 20 years from now, we're going to look back on today. We're going to look back on Army Futures Command and this type of initiative in a similar kind of way and having a similar impact on Austin. So I'm really proud to be part of that and excited to welcome everyone here today. So I'm going to next up introduce our mayor, Steve Adler, to welcome General Wesley. Steve's been a champion of Austin technology for the past 4 years as our mayor, and is always the first to step up to help bring great innovations like this here, and to speak up for Austin. We've worked on some hard problems together, It's not always easy, and I like people that I can work on hard problems with. But more often than not, we're celebrating something really awesome, actually right up here on this stage. And we've welcomed Tim Cook up here over the past couple months, the CEO of Apple. Just a month ago, as I mentioned, had the Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, up here, and even President Obama. And so we've got to do some fun things like that. But today, I think ranks up there, right there with the best of them, as we welcome Army Futures Command here to Austin. So with that, let me welcome our mayor, Steve Adler. Come on up.
So, General Wesley, and to you and to your command, welcome home. This feels right for our city, and we're excited. I also want to thank the Chamber for the work that was done, but Josh, I think a lot of the recognition needs to go to you. There's no better ambassador for our city. There's no greater driver of the institutional innovation industry that we have in the city than you. And I have frequently said and really believe that I love coming into this space and coming upstairs, because this space feels like Austin, Texas. So congratulations to you as well. You know, General, I've had the opportunity now for the last several days to receive a lot of congratulatory communications from some of my colleague mayors in some of the other cities that you were talking to, as well as mayors and folks around the country. And I've also had the opportunity to look at a lot of the armed service blogs and magazines and defense publications, not official publications, that all seem to be questioning at this point, why Austin? And I think that the theme generally runs something like, you've picked a city that's full of bleeding heart liberal hippies. How is it that you could possibly put a 3-star command in that city, 4-star command in the city, and for us in this city, I think there are 2 answers to that question that are really important. The first one is that putting the command in this city is an affirmation of what it is that is really at our roots. We are a creative, innovative, entrepreneurial place. You went back, Josh, to MCC, which was one of the first tech expressions of that culture in our city, and that would be a good place to start from. I've been here a little bit longer than that, so I go back farther than that. This is the city where in the 70s, Willie Nelson came to not only reinvent country music, but to reinvent it who listened to country music. That's Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has always thought outside of the box. Austin, Texas is a city that thinks looking forward. It thinks into the future. This is a city that prides itself on anticipating and recognizing not where we are, but where it is that we're going to go. So when the Army was looking for an environment that would be one that the Army could use to grow, to focus on forward trends, on futures, to modernize, to explore boundaries and horizons, no other place other than Austin, Texas, so meets that. So it is an affirmation of what we believe about ourselves and one of our most crucial elements of who we are. The second reason I think it's really important is because this gives Austin truly the opportunity to be in our nation's service. Austin in our nation's service is what this project and program and command is about. What more unique contribution could this city be making to our national security than to be one element of helping to foster innovation and creativity? This is right up our alley. This is the unique contribution that we can be making to our commonwealth with the rest of our country. So we are so excited at this opportunity And as I have said to you before, and as I will continue to say, anything that you need, any assistance that my office can provide to help to ensure the success of standing up this command and then its success, it is something that is near to dear for who we are and what we aspire to. So, General, welcome home to Austin, Texas. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have no room for complacency, and history makes clear that America has no preordained right to victory on the battlefield. Simply, we must be the best if the values that grew out of the Enlightenment are to survive. It is incumbent upon us to field a more lethal force if our nation is to retain the ability to defend ourselves and what we stand for.
We find ourselves today, in my mind, at a bit of a transition period in history, and you've heard me talk about it several times before, about a change in the character of war. We are in that change, literally in that fundamental change in the character of war right this minute. And we are somewhere, my guess, is sort of in the middle of maybe a 10, 20, 30-year historical process. The nature of war is never going to change, but the character of war is changing before our eyes. With the introduction of a lot of technologies, with a lot of societal changes, with urbanization and a whole wide variety of other factors. If we, the United States Army, if we, the United States military, do not recognize the need for change, and if we do not adapt and pivot to that change, then, in my mind, that will be a grave strategic mistake.
This means growing the force while maintaining quality, reshaping it to be more robust and successful in all domains, and modernizing it with the best weapons and equipment available to guarantee clear overmatch in future conflicts.
Being ready to fight tonight is not enough. The Army must modernize today to be ready to fight tomorrow's wars against increasingly capable adversaries and near-peer competitors. The Army must make the hard choices and need investments to rapidly develop capabilities that our soldiers will need to shape, fight, and win decisively across all domains on complex future battlefields.
The era of minor fixes is over. We need to fundamentally relook the whole acquisition process, beginning with the requirements piece of it, and all the way through to the testing part and fielding. And to do that means you need to take a holistic approach, which looks at processes, programs, people, policies, and what you're trying to eventually get at is a fundamentally new system that in the end changes culture as well. Under the concept we're developing with Army Futures Command with regard to the cross-functional teams, what we envision is, with the unity of effort and unity of command, adopting a process that is enabled by the NDAAs, where we prototype, test, learn, fail, prototype, test, learn, fail. We are looking at reducing a requirements development process that currently runs about 5 years, 60 months, down to 12.
The U.S. Army is shifting to modernize its force and prepare ourselves for a future environment in order to stay well ahead of the end. We do not want a level playing field. We do not want an even fight, a fair fight against our enemies. We want to be so dominant, so good, so capable that our enemies would never dare attack the United States, and that our enemies know for sure if they did, they would lose.
So in 2008, the state of Russia invaded the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. And if you think back to that time, by all accounts, Russia's incursion into former Soviet Georgia was a failure. They didn't know how to coordinate their logistics, their intelligence was poor, their operations were unsuccessful, their fires were inaccurate, and at the end of that 2008 incursion, President Putin looked at his equivalent of an interagency and he said, "We will fix our army." One of his generals said, "Well, sir, if you do that, we're going to need resourcing, we need priorities, we need your assistance, we need this, we need that." And President Putin fired him on the spot. 6 short years later, Russia acquired the state of Crimea without firing a shot, and then conducted an incursion into eastern Ukraine. And by all accounts, all those things that I mentioned, logistics, intelligence, sensor shooter connectivity, fires, successive operations had all reversed themselves in 6 short years. Russia is a peer of ours, and they're challenging us in every domain. China is a peer of ours, and they are challenging us in every domain. Our peers have seen that the United States Army is the best army on the planet, and they are investing in order to challenge that across all domains. China and the South China Sea, you see the significant investment in the South China Sea islands, and that is to keep any threat away from China because they want no part of it. They've invested fundamentally in their conventional forces in ways that are unprecedented. Our peers are challenging us. Now that might seem daunting, and if you study this, you might be a bit concerned. But the one message I've got for you here is we've been here before as a nation. If you go back to 1973, we went through a fundamental transformation that was deliberate and took years of investment across the enterprise to make us a different army. And that army that we invested in 1973 because of the threats that we saw from the Soviet Union is the army that we enjoy today. It's the army that we are proud of today. It's the army where you shake soldiers' hands in airports and say thank you for your service. That army was built based on the convictions of the threats of the 1970s, particularly from the Soviet Union. So my point would be that we've been here before. We know how to do this. But the world has changed. The world has changed fundamentally in many ways. And if you study it, you know that the human behavior has become hyperactive based on information technology and ubiquitous sensors, etc. Weapon systems have become more lethal. The competition space before conflict has become much more volatile and important. The world has changed. As General Milley said, the character of war is changing. If we look back 50 years from now, think for a minute. We live in a nation that is amazing. And we live out those privileges every day in a city like Austin. And we love it. But one thing that has occurred to me, I grew up, I was a naive young kid. I loved our nation. And one thing as I've studied what's going on now is somewhat sobering, but important, is that our destiny is not destined. Our destiny is not destined. And I'm convinced when we look back 50 years from now, just like General Milley said, is we are going to identify 2018 as a center of gravity of time when we had an opportunity to make some decisions, make some investments, make some difficult changes to remain the best army in the world, to protect a culture that we believe in. And I believe that that time is right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Eric Wesley, and I am so excited to be with you here today. And so I just wanted to open with that and give you a little teaser on where we're going. Mayor, thank you for that introduction. I want to congratulate you personally, the University of Texas, the greater city of Austin, the state of Texas, for a very significant decision on the part of the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army. This is massive. And I want to try to explain a little bit of that to you, sort of cast a vision of where we're going. But this is a time, this is a week, this is a day where Austin should be proud of what you've accomplished, such that you became so attractive to, I think, the second biggest institution on the planet, that we want to come here with our four-star headquarters, the Army Futures Command. This is a testament to the people of Austin, because Mayor, you are absolutely right. What attracted us, look, we had a number of things we were looking at. We wanted to be near good talent. We wanted to be near distinguished academics that are renowned worldwide. We wanted to be near industry that is progressive and achieving results. And we wanted to be in an innovative culture. By all measures, it was Austin, among the most competitive cities in the nation, that optimized that. There was one other, and that is a community that our soldiers and families and DA civilians would want to live in. And that really gave you some great marks. In fact, I got to tell you, I can't tell you the number of people since the decision was made want to get on this bandwagon and come get a job in Austin. But it was the competitive nature of the city, and in case anybody's wondering, the city of Austin, University of Texas Systems, and others, Board of Regents has been fantastic, and they have been very gracious in their efforts to encourage us to come here But I want to be clear with you, before any incentive was on the table, we were making a decision to come to Austin because of those elements that I described. So again, congratulations to the City of Austin. Thank you, Mayor, for all the work you did. Josh, where's Josh at? You were brilliant in your 24-hour alert in terms of getting something together alongside the Chamber of Commerce. One of the things I've talked to the media about is what is it about Austin? What about the culture in addition to the technology, the innovation? And I said, you know, all the cities we went to were innovative cultures. All of them were proud of their incubators and their accelerators. But one of the things that was different about Austin is when we came here, first of all, it's a southern city, we felt welcome here. We were immediately welcomed in. In fact, when I landed on Friday, within 30 minutes of arrival, I got a call from the president of the Board of Regents welcoming me to Austin, and it's been that way every day since. But it's more than just Southern hospitality. It's Southern welcoming nature, but also this wherewithal. Everybody knows Texans make stuff happen. See that? Right? So everybody knows that Texas makes stuff happen. But then there was a third component. It was not just that you were welcoming, not just that you have wherewithal, but you were willing to reach out to the Army and say, hey, we're going to show you how to do this. We're going to show you our tools so that you can be good too. And so one of the things I said to the I said, sir, we could go to Austin today, turnkey and start up right now. And so here we are. So let me get to the relevant aspect of the people in the room. What is it about the world has changed? And you know this as well as I do, but I want to put it in context of Army challenges. You know, we were really good in the industrial era, this last century that we just left. We're renowned in the Army for innovative solutions. Sometimes we're in a crisis and we've got to fix or figure things out like right now. So we're good innovators, but we are a massive bureaucracy. And so one of the problems that we have is, as an institution, we had a laborious industrial model that takes years and years to go from analysis, a description of the operational environment, the threat, to developing requirements, to prototyping, and finally getting through a bureaucratic acquisition process. Anytime that you go after a technology where the shelf life and relevance of that technology is shorter than the length of the program of record, you've got a problem. We need to get inside of that threshold. The second point is that if you're a startup, and this is the era of startups, where young kids with laptops go to Starbucks and they collaborate and they start a company. And then they may sell it and do really well and do something else. But in that kind of era, those two kids in Starbucks with those laptops not only can't break through the bureaucracy of the United States Army and get into our labs in order to start prototyping and sell a product to the Army to help our soldiers, not only can they not do it, they want no part of that. Because they're moving fast and they're collaborating with ideas and they want to make things that are effective and useful to this great nation. They don't want to bust through all of that bureaucracy. So what's the solution? We're coming to you, right? So we know that we have to get in that space. If you listen to the Secretary of the Army, he said, we need to change our culture. We can't rely on the past of 1973 to become the greatest army in the world. We need to get into the current culture, which means we need to change our own. We need to break China, which is why this is the largest reorganization or restructuring of the second largest institution on the planet right now. More than 90,000 soldiers this will be affected by in terms of restructuring, the biggest restructuring since 1973. But one of the components of restructuring is moving out of our fenced-in, walled-in cities with ubiquitous security, and we're going to embed into a culture that knows how to innovate. So we'll have UTS has, like I said, been very gracious with helping us get into the UTS headquarters there, the details of which we're still working out. We'll have a headquarters over there in UTS, and they'll do headquarters things. But coming to Austin is not good enough. Just coming and renting some space isn't good enough. We need to get in where these accelerators are. We need to bump into people who are innovating. As Josh says, we need to smash into innovators. which means what we will do is we're establishing an Army applications lab, which is intended to leverage these accelerators and incubators not unlike Capital Factory. And our first step will be to take our innovation center, our innovation cell, which is Army Applications Lab, and we're going to grab some, well, pay for. We're not going to invade. So we're going to enter into an agreement and get some space here in Capital Factory so we can be bumping into people who are thinking, who have ideas that we have not thought of. Because I can still employ the great labs that the Army have that have been successful over the years and still doing great things. But unless I can inculcate the ideas that can only be found in Starbucks or in Capital Factory, we will not be good enough to compete in the operational environment that I described. Now, what are the benefits? If you look at the benefits, look, I think, well, I was talking to a reporter not long ago, and they were talking about the 500 jobs, the 500 positions that are associated with the headquarters. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a minute detail relative to the impact and potential of what Army Futures Command will bring to Austin. Because the first thing we're going to do is put a demand signal for ideas. We're going to put a demand signal for requirements, for capability shortfalls. We're going to put a demand signal at the University of Texas where we have to solve problems that we don't know how to solve. And we're going to provide requirements or ideas that need to be developed to students, to innovators. So we're going to put a demand signal out there to the University of Texas, to the Texas system, and to the incubators in the city. And by the way, we're starting at Capital Factory, but some of the others out there, if you've got some unique innovator, we're going to be in your space too if you welcome us in. So there's a demand signal. The other thing I would tell you is that we bring, as Josh alluded to, about billions of dollars of venture capital money, to coin a phrase. This command this year will manage over $8 billion in RDT&E money. And we are investing, investing in material development of over $40 billion worth of material requirements. And you can imagine those billions are managed by the headquarters right here in Austin. That doesn't mean they're not all coming to Austin, Mayor. But this is the place where that will be facilitated. This is the place where we're going to build relationships with academics. This is the place where we're going to build relationships with innovators that will help us solve these problems. So you can imagine the resources that will be available for a city that has the capacity and the potential to help us solve real hard problems as we move into the future. I'm going to wrap this up this way and hopefully be able to answer your questions because I don't want to talk all afternoon. But I will say this. A little bit of serendipity here. Spent some time at the University of Texas, spent some time with the university president, and it was noted that you have they have a saying over there that what happens here changes the world. We have a phrase that we use in the Army Futures Command, and it is we're going to change the world. So in 1973, the Army completely transformed itself. And in so doing, became the best army on the planet. At one point, not long after that, the Soviet Union blinked, partly because of the capability of the United States Army or the United States military. So when they blinked, the wall fell and the world changed. The world changed fundamentally, transcending the planet, because an army changed. Well, we're changing right now. And we have the potential, collaborating with the people of the University of Texas, the people at Austin, the people at the Capital Factory, and other accelerators. We have the potential to change the world in accordance with the values that we hold dear. And if we're really good, there is no war. And we continue to sustain the quality of life that we know and love, but we only do it when there's a whole-of-nation approach. We can't do it inside our fenced-in installations or our own Army labs. They're good labs, but we can't do it by ourselves. I think I've made the case that we need you. So we wanted to come to the best. We picked the best. Austin, Texas. We're here, and in accordance with that saying, we are just excited about the fact that we together will change the world. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you very much, Phil.
I'll also invite Jay Harrison, if you want to come join us up here as well. Jay is going to be leading the new Army Applications Lab that you just heard about. Want to grab a seat, Jay? Well, now you have some insight into what we have all been so excited about. So, we're now going to do a little fireside chat. We'll talk a little bit. I've been meeting with him a bunch this week, so I have a good idea of some of the beginning questions to ask. And then we're going to open it up to all of you as well, so you'll be able to ask questions too. But let's start. One of the greatest parts about this actually over the past week is also being able to get to know some of these fine gentlemen and women personally. So we've gotten to Craig Cummings, who's been very generous. Let us and Lawton, who's with him as well, have a little dinner over at their house. I got to know a little bit. So, General, I know you live in Virginia now. You've been spending lots of time in DC. Are you going to be an Austinite? Are you moving to Austin? Is that part of the deal?
As quick as I can.
Get here as quick as you can. All right. So, and how many moves is that for you?
I counted this morning, 15.
15 moves. Well, thank you for your service. I'm sure that's not easy on your family either, but I'm sure this will be the last one. We're glad to have you here. So as part of welcoming him here, I wanted to make sure he knew the most important things, and so I'm going to need all of your help with that. So first, a quick poll. If you could you can, I guess, clap. We'll make some noise. But so first, we're just going to help him understand what the best barbecue in town is. So if you're at Franklin's, we got something. All right. Cooper's? Not much. Rudy's? All right, what? Salt Lake? Ironworks? All right, so you can judge for yourself from that. Now, I've heard a rumor, though, that your favorite barbecue might actually be Mexican food. So let's give them a taste of the So, Guero's? No, not Guero's. All right, Marty's? Marty's not my favorite. I have to say it, but it's not. Taco Deli? Taco Deli usually gets one of it. What else? What else for Mexican food? Nacho Rancho. All right. Okay, so now you got your lay of the land. Okay, so now the important stuff's out of the way. So the creation of the Futures Command. You said up here on stage, and I've heard it a few times, that this is the biggest reorganization of the Army in the past 45 years. So the last one, that was driven by the Cold War. What's so significant about how this is changing? What's actually changing?
Well, first of all, and I alluded to it, but if you apply Moore's law, we see a change in technology moving at an exponential rate. And so we can't rely on the fact that we build a combat system and expect for it to be relevant for 40 years. So we right now employ the M1 Abrams tank, and it was first fielded in 1980. This is 2018. If that was the Sherman tank out of World War II, we wouldn't have retired it until 2010. Nobody here would expect that we should use these Abrams. So we've got to be able to turn much faster than that. So we've reorganized such that we can get from a requirement to a fielded piece of equipment in a much shorter period of time.
And so how did that happen before?
You mean
Before the reorg?
Yeah, so we're a big bureaucracy. And what we would do is one command would identify what the threat and future operational environment would look like. Another command would develop the requirements. Another part of the enterprise would then go buy those. And of course, across that bureaucracy, you start to lose the unity of effort that you're trying to achieve. In this case, all of the resources and all of the decision-making associated with modernizing the enterprise for material development will be under one 4-star headquarters 2 blocks away.
And so that whole process from beginning to end will happen in one place. That's the big change. Great. And so you talked about this a bit, but so what is so fundamentally different now that requires that? What about the world has changed?
Well, I think the fact that I said the hyperactive nature of human behavior because of communication. So you cannot count on the fact that nation states will dominate within their own sphere, and populations and transcendent organizations have an impact on the way nations behave. So that speed of behavior requires us to be much more agile and be able to react quickly. The other thing is we have to be able to correspond left of conflict in order to preclude combat. Now, much of this is...
What did that mean?
Well, this is an interesting point, I think. You know, our culture is one where we don't believe we're a warfighting people, whether you agree with that or not, are wired into our DNA. We don't believe that we're a warfighting people. So our policies, rules, laws, and the Constitution, frankly, has a fundamental distinction between peace and war, and we think war is the anomaly. What we're finding is our peers don't agree with that. Our peers are always in conflict. And so to empower soldiers with creative tools to compete prior to conflict in order to preclude conflict, and then if conflict ensues, we will be already ahead of them.
I guess the whole definition of conflict is changing too.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thanks for joining us up here. Jay, you are technically a, are you civilian now? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I'm not technically a civilian. I'm all civilian.
You're all civilian. You're a civilian now, but you were in the Navy, and I've learned also that this is quite competitive as well. I'm surprised he's allowed to be up on stage with the general, but you were in the Navy, and then you were an entrepreneur. So real quickly, just to give us some context and a little bit of why you're one of the people helping to run this initiative with Army Applications Lab. Tell us real quickly what about your startup MAP6 and what it did after you came out of the Navy.
So, interestingly, I think a lot of the issues that we were struggling with right after 9/11 are continuing to be issues for us today. I mean, after 9/11, we have a military that was built to fight a particular type of conflict, and when we started to see this unstructured, reactive insurgency that didn't behave by the rules that we built our capabilities around, it engendered a reaction. We got to go do something. We got to provide our folks with the capabilities they need to survive and be effective on the battlefield. And an example that most folks are familiar with are the improvised explosive devices that we had to contend with. So I was a civilian inside the Department of Defense during the early stages of that window, and had the opportunity to lead some of the efforts to go out and source different solutions. And I got to tell you, within the DoD, that was the Wild West. We had money that was being thrown around to go out and get things in the field as quickly as possible. And if you look historically across the history of the department and the military and the Army, these crisis moments tend to be the points at which we're at our most innovative. We got to solve the problem. We got to solve the problem.
Necessity is the mother of innovation.
That's exactly right. And what ends up happening over time when the crisis goes back to steady state is that some of these interventions that we deploy end up reverting themselves back to the status quo. I think where we are today is we have to stop being reactive and we have to be proactive to make sure that we're ahead of our adversaries, because we may not have time to catch up the next time. And it's a credit to the Army leadership that honestly they're re-engineering the whole capability development enterprise to get it down this year. You know, I'm a failed MBA student, so I like to think that I got into the work that I didn't get through. And one of the things that I remember being told is the book Good to Great. If you go back and read Good to Great, not many of the companies profiled in Good to Great are still great. The lesson from that is that the organizations that don't disrupt themselves are going to fail and internally disrupt themselves. And that's what, in effect, the Army is doing today, I would argue. And so I'm a startup guy kind of myself. You're asking why I'm here. I mean, I like to mess things up. I like to disrupt. I see this as the biggest sandbox to disrupt for a positive outcome in the history of at least my career in the DoD.
I'm going to reinforce something that he said. You mentioned not being in react mode. Candidly, we have a longer history in the nation of getting the next war wrong than getting it right. And oftentimes we fail in the interwar years to anticipate changes that are required. The cost, if you think of World War I, is 18 million casualties. Massive. There was one time I've argued we got it right, and it was that time period that I mentioned between the 1970s and ultimately 1991 and then now, where we built an army that was anticipating the changes, and frankly, it precluded a lot of war and it minimized the impact. We're in another interwar period, and we got to get it right in order to preclude war and to minimize impact if it ensues.
So, Jay, your whole career you've been dealing with innovation in defense, which at some level, as we've kind of already heard a little bit, it sounds frustrating, right? Because you're trying to move this massive boat and make change. What do you think about why now? Why is this going to work now? Why did you come back to work with the military now to work on this? Is what about it gets you most excited about it?
So I think some of the rules of competition that we see playing out in the commercial industry are teaching the department a lesson about how we have to change. I do think that it's largely a function of leadership. I think Ash Carter probably started the ball rolling in terms of waking folks up to the new rules that we need to internalize. I think to the credit of the current administration, they have maintained that emphasis. And I think the Army leadership is really the first to take the leap of completely re-engineering how we build and buy things around some of these new rules. That's what makes this period in history unique. I mean, the innovation cycles are speeding up at faster and faster rates. If we're not turning inside the loop of our adversaries, we will lose.
So, General Wesley, you're a 3-star general. You guys can see the 3 stars on his chest right there. So part of this reorganization creates, you've heard them refer many times to a 4-star command. And I've learned to start to pick up on some of this lingo. So a 4-star command is basically it's a command led by a 4-star general. If you look on Wikipedia for how many 4-star generals there are, I believe there are technically 6 4-star generals in the Army, maybe 7. It was I think it was 6. If you count the chief of staff and the others, but there's, as I understand it, there've been 3 commands, 3 4-star generals who command a unit. So this creates a 4th command, so like a 4th branch within that, and that, as I understand it, requires Congress to vote and actually make that happen, right? Or is this is like everyone uses the phrase how something requiring an act of Congress is like practically impossible. So can you just give us some perspective on that? Like, how big of a deal is it to make another 4-star general and another 4-star command?
What it does is it reflects the seriousness with which the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army take a modernization and the decision to change in order to be relevant. What they're doing is they're betting that this is so important that it is a fundamental part of the institution and are increasing the number of commands by 1 to have this one of our major commands.
So the rumor, and I know you're not going to confirm any choices or anything, but the rumor in the Military Times that I read last night is that, which I now read the Military Times, is that, or at least their Twitter account, is that Lieutenant General John Murray is the top pick. Do you have any idea what the timeline looks for it going from being rumors to actually knowing who the pick's going to be?
Here's what I'll tell you. I know Lieutenant General goes by Mike Murray. He's fantastic, and pending any confirmation, I can't get ahead of the Army. But if he were to be selected, he's perfect for Austin. He's commanded at Fort Hood a number of times. He's got a Texas attitude. And I think he's going to be the guy that understands the enterprise and has worked at the enterprise level quite some time. So if the Army selects him, not getting ahead of my chief, then I think he's going to be perfect for us.
And are we just waiting on Congress? Is that like?
Well, when we find out what the Senate confirms, then you'll be the first.
We'll be the first to know. All right, so hopefully soon. All right, Jay, what is Army Applications Lab that you're now leading?
So the vast majority of what I'll call the Army Capability Development System or enterprise, and eventually I'm going to learn not to talk like that. It'll take a while being with normal people before they're going to show some of the lingo. It is driven by top-down decision making. And General Wesley alluded to this. We spend a lot of time looking into the future. we derive requirements that govern the things that we buy, and then we issue contracts to folks to build the systems that we need. And that is a lengthy, top-down, protracted process that we follow that takes time. One of the reasons it takes time is we're trying to mitigate risk. I mean, we're dumping billions and billions of dollars into select systems.
Not dumping, but investing.
There you go. But mitigating risk around those giant decisions we have to make. And oh, by the way, we have to do that. I mean, that is the responsible thing to do, and for certain types of products, it in fact is the best way to go. Having said that, that's not necessarily the only way the world innovates today. You know, back in the day, the only people who could afford to innovate were the people with a lot of capital. Today, that's no longer the case. The democratization of the means of production and the means of distribution, the marginal cost of production basically go to zero with software. The world doesn't innovate in the same way that it did even 30 years ago. So we see individuals producing particularly nasty things that we have to deal with. We see really bright folks in their garages developing technologies that could represent a fundamental disruption to how a business does things or how the military does things. And that's not necessarily a top-down process. That's not the Army issuing a request for proposal that says, I need X, Y, and Z. Well, if we knew we needed it, we'd never be disrupted. We need the things that we're not expecting, that we're not anticipating, that we're not looking for. And the only way we can understand really what the implications of emerging technology are is to partner with entrepreneurs, to partner with innovators, to partner with researchers and technologists, to activate networks of partners to help us scan what the landscape looks like and then relate it back to our context. So that emergent approach to capability development is what the Army Applications Lab has been created to support.
One other point, this is a good point pointed out. You know, if you say the Army is betting by appointing a 4-star command to go with modernization, there's other indicators of, you know, will this really be a change? First, you just need to look at Jay here. He doesn't fit your typical model of an Army colonel, for example. So this headquarters is not going to look the same. So he rides a Harley, he wears a beard, he's a former Navy guy, and he's an entrepreneur. So the Army said, who's going to be the Chief Innovation Officer? It's going to be Jay Harrison. So this is not your normal Army enterprise here. We're talking about breaking China.
I'm still waiting for the Army to figure out the implications of that decision. I think I'm in a grace period right now, but we'll see how it all works out.
Joe, can you add on to anything that Jay was saying about why you need to work with startups? I mean, you think about the Army and the military and your R&D labs, and you think you must have tons of brilliant scientists, and you have, as we know, huge budgets and resources. What is it that a startup's going to do that you can't do on your own?
I think, I'll put it in a phrase that I think is relevant to everybody in the room. What we want to do is outsource innovation and technology. You know, why would I just rely on the labs that I have, where I may have fantastic scientists who may have worked for me for 20 or 30 years? Why not open the aperture and come to a place, and whether it's through a hackathon or just crashing into other innovators, I want to pull ideas in and not eliminate them by virtue of the fact that I've got a fence around the place, right? So we want all the best ideas, and those reside in places like this. It's outsourcing innovation.
What's some example that you've seen of actually tech on the battlefield making a difference, tech, innovation being used? Is there something that sticks out in your mind?
I'll give you two examples. One is I'm an armor officer, and I've fought in conflict with an Abrams tank. And none of you here are probably materials guys, but an Abrams tank integrates all technologies or a multitude of technologies. But I'll tell you what, being an armor officer on a tank in conflict, when you have almost zero fear that you will be overcome by virtue of the fact that you know you're on the best product in the world, gives you a level of confidence and audacity that automatically translates into overmatch. So that would be one example. The other one in OIF 1, when we went from Kuwait up to Baghdad in 2003 across a pretty ominous desert where navigation is challenged when you have nothing but a pool table to navigate off of. And you have this thing that we're all used to in our cars right now, which is a GPS, but not only a GPS on a screen that shows you where you're at, but where all of your other elements are relative to anyone else. And to have a scrolling map and not be working through a book because of the technology through a thing called Blue Force Tracker that was fielded in a highly accelerated rate, largely due to innovators. That was a massive change.
So Jay, I know that Army Applications Lab is itself almost like a startup too, and I know you're looking at it in a way that you've got some ideas, but you're going to adapt and learn and grow with that too. But what are some of the first things we could expect to see out of Army Applications Lab here in Austin? What kind of programs are you going to be running?
So, thank you for asking that question. We have a number of pilots we're going to be deploying both into Austin and around the country over the course of the next 12 months. One of the critical things that we're getting at with these pilot efforts is to try to lower the barriers to interaction with outside partners. So with university students and innovators and startups, really the people who are likely to provide us with new ideas and new approaches that the Army needs to capitalize on. One of the pilots that I'm most excited about is something called HALO. And the Army, really DOD, has really honed in, I think, over the last couple of years on the fact that we make it too difficult for folks to contract with us. And that indeed is part of the issue, but it's only a small part of the issue if you're a startup. One of the things that we want to try to address is the fact that when we typically contract with a vendor to deliver a product to the Army, we require that product to do things that the commercial marketplace doesn't demand. So if we're interested in leveraging a product out of the commercial marketplace that a startup has produced, we don't necessarily want to go back to that startup and say, okay guys, you need to learn mil-spec, you need to design the on and off button so you can turn it on if the guy's wearing a glove, you need to make sure that it doesn't interfere with all of our other communication systems and it operates on our networks in a safe way. That is in fact the last thing that we
So like something as simple as this microphone that we're holding. If you wanted to, like all those things you said, there would be dramatic changes made to the microphone to make it a military microphone.
Well, dramatic, there will be changes. What we are doing with HALO specifically is co-developing along with startup partners products that are based on commercial offerings that we can then modify back to support Army applications. So we don't want the startup to become expert in building products for the Army. We want the startups to bring us the idea and their knowledge and their use cases, and we will provide support to the startup to re-engineer the product for the uses that we have. Now, importantly, we don't want to own the IP. I mean, we do want to, in fact, have access to the technology, so some type of government use rights on new intellectual property. But the IP, we want the startup to own, hook, line, and sinker, and we will pay for the engineering and the development costs.
So just to put it in the starter's perspective, they might come to you with a solution. You say, yeah, that's interesting, but in order for us to use that, we need to make it more secure. We need to, if it's physical, maybe make these changes to it, other things. And you pay to go have maybe a consultant or somebody else, or you do it yourself, come make those changes. But I get to own everything that you did and keep it. So it's still my intellectual property. I have to let you use it, and I don't have to pay anything for it.
That's exactly right, although maybe I'll comment on one point. Objectively, what we're looking to have is government personnel staffing a manufacturing platform that would be in Austin to work alongside the startup community to effect these modifications.
So it's a team you would have that could go help build those things. Right. And how much equity do you take for that?
I take 25%, but it's personal.
But
our attorney's sitting in the front row.
She's nodding her head going, no. No, but in all seriousness, it's free money.
It's free money.
Non-dilutive. So they said they were one of the biggest venture capitalists in the world, except they don't take any equity. It's a pretty good deal. Okay.
So can we just be clear? Each contract will be negotiated.
Thank you. It's my lawyer up here giving me the look.
Right, but the potential here is to have resources that can go help you to make your products work better with them. And typically, these types of projects are non-dilutive. There's different types of funding available to help them get what they need and to help you move it forward in a way that helps your business too. And a lot of, while those requirements might be specially needed for the military and for defense, I bet a lot of those changes will also be useful rolled back other ways too. So, okay, so. General, how can the Austin startup community interact with and get to know you and the Futures Command, other than coming to great events like this today?
Well, it starts here, right? One of the things I said to the mayor, I said, don't worry, we are not going to invade Austin with a bunch of Green Army trucks rolling in here. In fact, if you're not observant, you might not even notice, frankly. And the reason for that is we want to make sure we're integrated. We want to participate in the ecosystem of Austin, Texas. But
I'm pretty sure we noticed.
Yeah, this might be the last thing. See, we need to show the flag today, but after today, it's all off. I told my assistant secretary that the only reason I went around with him is because I'm the one that looked good in uniform. He was the guy in charge. But you won't see this anymore. So what we're talking about is the place that you want to engage with us is going to be in a venue not unlike this. And we're going to hang a shingle. And it's going to be clear. And you're going to have an opportunity. We want to create an interface. And the interface we're creating is our where we hang a shingle in an accelerator. You asked earlier, what is AAL, Army Applications Lab? It's our plug-in to the accelerator community. And so you ought to come looking for us, Army Applications Lab.
And why was it so important? I know the answer to these all sound but why is it so important that it be in the middle of downtown? Why does it have to be in the urban community?
So we cite the Allen curve, a well-studied phenomenon that says that where there's greater density of people, more communication happens. Might seem intuitively obvious to us, but where communication happens, so goes innovation. And we want to be where that density of communication is so that we can get at the greatest opportunity for innovation.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to open it up to the audience for questions. I'm sure you have a lot of them. We have a technology innovation here called the Catch Box. This is a microphone that I throw at you. So if you want to ask a question, you have to be able to catch. Shane, I know you can catch, so I'm going to not embarrass anybody by throwing it to you first.
Thanks, Josh.
So you hold it up and you speak into the box.
I guess I don't have to hold it this close. Sir, welcome to Austin. One of several former armor officers in the crowd today, and a former 1st Brigade 1st ID officer as well. So, Roger. The question I have is, one of the reasons that Austin works so well, and one of the things that makes Austin so unique is that very few of us are from here, and so we all had help when we got here. And because this is Texas and we're friendly folks, in addition to being able to get stuff done, we like to help each other. And so what makes Austin work so well, in my opinion, is that we all help each other. It's just part of the culture. So there's a lot of organizations represented here today that are not startups necessarily, but that are Austinites and are going to want to help. So we're all going to go back to our organizations and we're going to sit down and say, man, this is awesome. I mean, this is going to fundamentally change Austin. And the question that they're going to have is, cool, how can I help? So what's a couple of things, messages that we can take back when people say, as a private citizen, individually, not necessarily institutionally, how can we help?
Well, that's a great question, and I wish I was better prepared for it. But let me just share a couple things. One is, it's not acceptable for us just to have a headquarters and embed into the startup community or in the incubators. We're Austinites, man. And when we come to a city, in the Army, you embed in that city. And if you don't, you got to give nothing else. You lay down roots for your kids because you got to create home wherever you're at. You know this, right? So we come here, we're going to build relationships more than just the innovation culture. We want to be friends with University of Texas. We want to go to UT football games, right? We want to be good citizens of this. And so in that environment, I think we're going to be able to generate relationships that will afford us the opportunity to leverage those things that you might offer. But I don't know specifically, to answer your question. I'm going to think about it, though, and if you stick around for more than 30 minutes afterwards, I will come back and find you, because I think it's an important question, and I want to answer it a little bit more thoroughly.
I have an answer. I mean, a couple of very, very tactical things. I mean, one, we need help telling our story to the community. I think you've heard some things here today. Help us get the word out. Help us ask good questions. I mean, help us build our narrative. But we really need to connect to the community first and foremost, because innovation's a network sport, and we have to be networked. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is I work for a really demanding person who has expectations that we're going to start doing things very quickly, and we need a good team. I mean, we need the best team that we can find on the ground down here. So AAL's hiring.
What kind of positions?
To be honest with you, we're looking for folks with entrepreneurial mindsets. So you don't necessarily have to have a technical background, although we will do a lot of technology-related things. So I'm not dissuading the technologists in the crowd by any means, but you don't have to be a technologist. The most important thing is the connecting type of skill set and personality and awareness of how to synthesize opportunities with different potential technologies that the Army can leverage.
Thank you. General Wesley, I want to compliment you for a very eloquent presentation and understanding that most of us would very much appreciate knowing you better. I would like to comment on a couple things, and I hope that I'm not going too far afield, but we watched the Russian science community implode 2-3 decades ago. They don't know how to mass produce in quality, but the Chinese do. They went in 15 years from a set of engineering schools to 10 times that by now. So that threat is real, and I wonder if you would speak to that.
Sure. I'll talk briefly. I want to focus today on what we want to do here in Austin, but it is relevant for you to understand our requirements, right? So I think it's a relevant question. On a horizon, you hear a lot of people talk about Russia and what they're doing. We don't see China too far down the pike. They're not as capable as Russia. In the immediate term, Russia would be more capable. But right down around the corner is China. And it's the scale, as you note, that is a fundamental problem. But one of the good things that is helping us in our analysis right now is many of the things that they both are investing in are consistent. So if you build towards your more near-term concerns, you can be sure that what you're investing in has consistent, not identical, application to where the problems we may find later on. China's looking at a horizon of about 2050 to be dominant. And so they're down the pike a little bit, but I think as we look at the solution sets, as we collaborate and we tell you what the concerns are, the problems we're trying to solve, I think for the most part, they are going to be consistent with the next threat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So I started my career at the MCC Consortium that Josh started off talking about. And the most rewarding things that I did were deliver solutions to Army Research Labs. These were game-changing technologies. So I don't know if this is a question or statement, but I'm ready to get started now. And we're prepared to deliver this open architecture that you need to plug and play. So
Open
I'm very
architecture for what?
For the solutions you need to modernize the military. So it's more of a statement. We're ready, we're prepared. We've been working on this, and I'd like to accelerate a discussion with you and Jay. I'll leave it with that.
One of the things you'll learn for anyone who's been to any of my talks or anything is I always let people in the front row ask questions first because nobody sits in the front row. So we'll keep going down here.
What's going on? My name's Levi Rogers, and retired Army Green Beret officer, combat wounded. One of the largest things that are affecting our people, the military people, is a transitioning service member. It's something that many in this room understand. Fort Bliss, Fort Hood, Lackland, Randolph, Fort Sam Houston, tremendous amount of veterans exiting the military today. What will Futures Command do with their exciting excitement? I mean, a lot of disabled veterans and veterans in the community that would struggle with the transition to be accepted into the civilian world. What will Futures Command do to bring that population here to Austin to help transition?
I think it's a good question, and thanks for your service, first of all. The second, I want you to meet this guy in the blue jacket when you're done. share your card with him, who is passionate for helping transitioning veterans. The third thing is it's serendipitous that Bunker Labs would have a cooperation with Capital Factory. And so we think that just, number one, being here in Austin with a couple different relationships that are fundamental to the same passion and interest you have, we think we can enable that by virtue of our requirements and help get you involved in the potential solution for those requirements.
Good stuff.
Both
Thank you,
questions?
sir.
Let's go. Can you throw it to the lady right here in the middle? Almost.
All right, first off, I want to say thank you so much for coming. We're really happy that you're here. Former Navy veteran myself. If I bring you the solutions and I bring you the innovation, will you have someone to meet me halfway with tackling the bureaucracy of RFP on staff?
So that is, what you just said has been the biggest challenge we've had, and I'll let Jay comment also, but this is my passion right here, because as I said, if you're a small startup, how do you negotiate that bureaucracy? The first pilot that we're doing, Halo, is intended to give us the means and to create the muscle memory to be able to coach innovators and startups to work through that process, the roadmap to make it easy so that it doesn't become this overwhelming giant that you got to sort out. Jay, you got to come.
So there are a lot of organizations in the Army universe that deal with prototypes, building prototypes, making prototypes, pulling things in from industry so we can use in niche types of roles. The Army historically has not had a proponent for non-traditional products. So making sure that these things don't just stop at a prototype, but can actually be scaled and ultimately turn into a product inside the Army. That in fact is one of the roles that the AAL is going to try to play. And Halo will be our initial set of services that focus on meeting you halfway, and not just providing an entry point, but providing a potential path to a scalable product.
Awesome.
Jay, you when I first heard Halo, of course, I thought it was like the first-person shooter fighting game that was named after. But you told me a really interesting story. Where does the name Halo come from?
This is going to make me look like a dork.
It's okay.
It's a three-body orbit, so a highly eccentric halo orbit is three bodies orbiting around one another and influencing each other's path. And in our case, it's civil, military, and industry.
Awesome. So we have one right here.
I captured it. I'm Michelle Atchison with the University of Texas System. I handle the national security portfolio. I want to welcome you to Texas, but I think more importantly, one of the major things that the command can achieve is that reorient that a multitude of people can be patriotic and support, whether in uniform or out of uniform. We have so many young people that haven't experienced being in uniform, but are still patriotic. And I think having the command in this environment will help reinstill the fact that regardless of your walk of life or what you're doing, you can contribute to national security and to the Army and the betterment of your community. So I want to thank you for being here, but I think the greater message, not only in achieving overmatch, is also being able to reinvigorate the personal relationship of the military to the civilian population. So thank you.
Thank you. We're hoping, other than Jay, we're hoping to put a human face on Army people.
Actually, let me very briefly comment on that point. There are a lot of different types of national service. Wearing the uniform is one of them. Being a civilian inside the government's another one. We really aspire to create different modes of service through this interaction. We want to build lifelong relationships with people. Not just to build products that are specific to the Army, but part of our thesis here, and I think it's validated by the facts, the Department of Defense has had a historical role in driving high-tech value creation for the nation. Now that's not a story that gets told enough. And it's not just the internet and GPS and things that happened 20, 30 years ago, it's autonomous vehicle technology. Virtually all of the significant autonomous vehicle technology that we're capitalizing on today was initially underwritten by the DARPA challenge. We want to create connections between that risk-taking technology investment and entrepreneurs, so entrepreneurs can build products not just for the commercial market. I mean, obviously we would like to take advantage of it as well. But we feel that there's a synergy here that allows people to support the safety and security of their nation and also create a whole lot of value in the marketplace.
We'll do our next question. I'm going to make a new rule for the catch box, which is you have to throw it to the person that's farthest away from you.
Hello, my name is Julie Baez-Pabula. I'm also a chair on the UT Hispanic Alumni Network. We welcome you to bring that awareness to our network and our community. I also just want to make a comment, Mayor Adler, I think you might have left, but please don't forget about our ISDs. The young people there really need this support. If we want to dig our roots here in the community, we need to start with our young people that are coming up. As a mother of a recent high school graduate, I pushed coding to the extreme. We were here all the time with him. So please just recognize our ISDs, and Jay and Lieutenant Wesley, we welcome you to the Hispanic Alumni Network as well at UT, and to spread this message.
Do you have any youth engagement plans?
So let me address that. So the Army, for a long time now, we invest heavily. I want to make sure. So for a lot, that thing's a distractor, Josh.
hold till the question is done, please.
So the Army's been interested in youth and high schools and grade school for a long time, mainly because that's where the talent's going to come from who will join the Army. And usually it's a relational effort, and we're not going to try to steal your kids away. But it is putting a human face onto the role of service in the military. And that we're passionate about that. And so as we go into various communities, we start to spread out and identify schools that we can engage in.
Where's the box?
I'm here.
All right.
Hi, I'm Mike Mayo. Welcome to Austin. I'm a former Air Force officer and have been developing technology for the last 25 years. Much of it in collaboration with university partners. So my question to you is, how are you going to resolve, or what is the execution plan to be able to have this open environment in an age where it's becoming extremely difficult to work with universities because of ITAR compliance and covered unclassified information, to where, well, I guess the question is, how are you going to deal with that conflict working on DoD programs when you can't hardly work with non-U.S. citizens?
So I'm going to field this one. That's a great question, and it's come up a lot as we've interacted with the universities this week. I'll give you an example. I don't want to project that we have a complete solution here, but there are programs that the Department of Defense has been backing called, one of them is called Hacking for Defense. And that type of program is actually offered as a class within universities. The thing that makes it work, though, is framing national security problems in a way that allows us to release them to an open university environment. So if we're highly prescriptive about what we need in a way that could potentially reveal a vulnerability, that's really problematic. We can't necessarily release that information to the universe. But we don't necessarily need to do that. In fact, what we're looking for out of universities is to help us open up the aperture. So if we can describe problems in a way that allows for the creativity of our outside partners to help us think through what potential solutions would look like without revealing sensitive information, that is the type of approach we're going to be taking here. And I'll give a very brief example of what I'm talking about. So one of the problems that we fielded to the Hacking for Defense class recently involved tagging, tracking, and locating of high-value targets. And what we got from the sponsor inside the Army was a very detailed set of specifications that we could not give to a university, quite frankly. We translated that problem into tracking the movement of buffalo in the Western Rockies. Same basic characteristics, same type of solution, but nobody's going to get overly concerned about the buffalo movements. So we think we have some creative ways that we can start tackling how we interact with an open community.
You know, another thing I've realized from talking with them over the past week or so is that what they're not trying to do is create startup government contractors, right? This is not like, let's make new startup Lockheeds who are designed to go take our requirements and build them into solutions and create more of what we've already got. We've got great government contractors, and we've got lots of them to choose from, and they have, you know, lots of established processes and things like that. But it's about finding the things they didn't expect to find. And so if you think about it from that perspective, they don't have to necessarily give out the requirements or share all the confidential information. It's more about identifying things they can bring in once they recognize a fit and things like that too.
Yeah, there's really two things we're going after. You describe one as technology push, one is technology pull. You're probably aware of what that is. But some of them we're identifying requirements in a way that Jay might have described that we're looking for in order to solve problems. But the other, just by virtue of being near you, we're going to see potential for disruptive technology that you might not have recognized or connected to our requirements because you're not in the environment where we can see an application. So it's proximity is everything.
So time for 2 or 3 more questions, and then I do believe that you'll be able to hang out and answer some questions one-on-one as well too. So where's the box? All right, I see one woman in the back right here, and then another Ben and another woman over there. So if you want to throw it to her, or you got the box. You asked, then I'll throw it back.
Right. Sir, my name's Grant Demery. My question is about access to the warfighter or end user. So SOCOM just had an SMU get in some pretty serious legal trouble for letting a contractor design software directly with them prior to a solicitation. And they took that risk because you need to do that, to iterate your product directly with the customer. So my question is, will AFC make it easier to access the end user earlier in the design process?
Yeah, I'm not going to cite a specific authority, but here, the whole purpose of this and what Jay's going to be doing is to start exercising unique authorities and funding streams. You know, we tend to, those of us in uniform, oftentimes will blame the Congress because we have some bureaucratic requirements that we have to get through. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of holes that you can work your way through, or gaps, or caveats, or clauses that enable this creativity. What we don't do well, though, is leverage them. We haven't levied them to the degree we should because we don't practice it. So I can see where an institution could get it wrong, but the whole purpose of what we'll do here through Army Applications Lab is to start practicing using these unique authorities that the Congress has provided. So yes, okay?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would add is just that, you know, there are certain things that we have to document, and there's a way to do it, and if we do it the right way, as General Wesley said, there's a lot of that defeated. We have to do it the right way.
For those who are more from the startup side who may not be as familiar with it, this just comes down to they can't just find something they like and be like, great, I'm going to buy it from you, because there's rules about being able to make it fair that different people can bid on it and things like that. And so, but to the point he was making, sometimes if you don't know what you want already, or if someone's the only one that's got it, how do you move quickly and make things happen? These are all the things we're trying to juggle. In the back.
Yeah, so it's a more practical question, I guess. My name is Monique Faranzos. I'm a local entrepreneur, and I used to be a physicist at the weapons lab in a previous life. So one thing would like you to clarify is we're talking about applications that could be anywhere from, there's a spectrum from anywhere from DARPA-like applications that may be 10 or 20 years out in terms of an actual commercial product, to things that are possibly, maybe 12 months out or 24 months out, right? So I imagine we're on the spectrum here of applications that are more near term, but what is exactly the spectrum where you're looking to be active in engaging with the startup community? Because obviously, in a non-academic setting, we're not going to be looking at 20 years out. We're going to be looking at shorter applications, right? Shorter timelines.
In short, I'll tell you the spectrum. Jay has built a framework to be able to pull in anywhere along that pathway, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, those ideas that you're developing. But I'll let you get into any detail if you want to.
So I guess a couple of points. I mean, in general, I would say we're looking at things in the time scale that you would typically associate with a venture investment. So let's say 1 to 7 years at most. By the same token, we're not just looking for product. So I know we've been spending a lot of time talking about product. We are looking for ideas. I mean, we want to catalyze students to help come up with technology concepts that we should be thinking about to inform the things that we would invest in downstream. And that could take a lot of time, or researchers, or other members of the high-tech community. So if it's an idea phase type of opportunity, then we would expect that to take both investment and time to get to something we could physically use. The information value we want to start harvesting immediately so we can make decisions around those investments. As we move downstream, then the maturity of the things that we're looking for increases. And I would argue with Halo, we're looking for the most mature products. We're looking for things in general that already have been demonstrated at some level against either in the commercial marketplace or in some type of brass board level prototype that we can work with the inventors, work with the company to translate to a very near-term application. So it is a spectrum of things that we're looking for. We're not looking necessarily at what I would call foundational research. The Army has one of the most effective foundational research organizations in the world, which is also part of Futures Command, called the Army Research Laboratory. They're linked up with the Army Applications Laboratory at the hip, so they're our partners, and between the two of us, we would cover that complete spectrum.
Two more questions over here.
Hi, this will be okay here. I'm Irene Brinker with Diwali, and I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for your time. And I myself am a Soviet refugee that moved to this country as a child with my family, so the fact that you brought that up as a starting point, it actually really meant a lot to me. But my question is more as far as startups. I have my R&D team in the Ukraine, but we have an amazing team of advisors, including Michael Noe, the former CIO and COO of the U.S. Army and the DoD. I was told that if you're developing a physical product, it doesn't matter where it's developed, but any kind of data for the military needs to stay within the U.S. With your guidelines, with your program, how does that work? If I have a team outside of the U.S., are we still eligible?
Yeah, it is a good question. We would get the answer for you. I don't have the answer unless you get it.
I don't. I mean, the only thing that I would argue, maybe say is this. I mean, the type of innovations we're looking for are not just domestic. I mean, we need to be tapping into sources of innovation around the world. So it is fully our expectation to identify what authorities we have, maybe push the envelope on those authorities to allow us to tap into innovation when and wherever it's taking place.
Yeah, if there's an idea that, or a technology we need, we figure out a provision to make it work. I just don't know the details.
Perfect. I mean, we're a U.S. company, but the bulk of my engineering is in the Ukraine, which I think is also important for our military to keep independent.
Certainly not uncommon. Ben?
First off, thank y'all so much for getting ready to set up shop here. We're very excited about it. My question concerns more about the evolution of warfare. So in the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen a lot more aggressive deployments by international adversaries using information and knowledge as a way of influencing communities, larger groups of people that are actually in very densely populated areas where you can seed ideas that happen amongst innovation. So I was curious as to, within the scope of how y'all are looking at the future of increasing lethality of the actions of our soldiers, what is the role of information warfare and also electronic warfare, i.e. the ability for us to disable people's dependence on technology to have access to information?
Yeah. So brilliant question. It's a good one. I'm glad you asked it. Because if you're a civilian or you're going to spend a lot of time in the military, you might have a very narrow view of the role of a combat formation, and it usually has to do with pulling a trigger and shooting a bullet, right? What I alluded to a little bit earlier is that because our peers, this is really important for any American, I think, to appreciate, because the space is changing. what we're finding is because our peers are reluctant to engage with us in close combat because we're pretty good, they've pushed a lot of the competition space, what we say, to the left. In other words, they're achieving their objectives to the left of conflict before there's a deployment. And so this has massive cultural implications that I think we all have to collectively come to embrace because of that dynamic that I described earlier. We need to get used to the idea that we will have to compete before there is a labeled conflict. We don't like to see ourselves in conflict before there's an actual labeled or named war. But in order to be competitive, in order to preclude war, in order to posture ourselves, we have to get in the information space. So what's the one that is most prevalent in our newspapers today? The question of collusion. And I suggest that's not the question. The question is, what did an adversary do to create dissension within something that had quasi-unity? It's not just the issue of our election, it's Catalonia, it's Brexit. And in every case, you can identify where adversaries, peers, competitors are trying to break the unity that exists within an alliance. And if we don't come to grips with those information operations, we're going to have a big trouble realigning our interests. On EW, this is from a technical perspective, electronic warfare, our peers are challenging us in every domain. We are used to, in the last 30 years, if you've watched conflict, and forgive me for going along on this, if you've watched conflict over the last 30 years, when post fall of the wall, when the Soviet Union fell, if there was a conflict, U.S. coalition forces and our allies would identify the conflict, maybe identify the opponent, start to deploy forces to that theater, and as I say all the time, stack metal for 6 months until we got everything we needed, and then we would engage in whatever objectives we were trying to seek. That kind of environment is gone with our peers because all domains will be challenged. We can't rely on the fact necessarily that the United States Air Force will be there. We can't rely on the fact that maybe we will have digital comms. We can't rely on the fact that we will be able to talk on a radio because of the EW problem. So why do I share that long story with you? There are a lot of creative people out there that will help us compete left of conflict. There will be people that help us in the competition phase to solve these problems of being able to communicate amidst a challenged environment in order to have assured PNT, position, navigation, and timing, so that our POSNAV is accurate. So there's a myriad of solutions or technologies that we need in this environment that is exponentially changed, where our peers are aggressively competing before there is ever a conflict. Sorry for the long answer, but it's really important. This is not just about building weapons. It runs the spectrum of requirements.
Can I make one quick closing comment? Stand up, Eric. So Eric Frey has a wound care company, a bandage company, and I wanted to point out the work that he's doing because this, for the AAL, this is the archetypal opportunity that we're looking for. We're not just looking for kinetic. We're not looking for things that blow up. We're not even looking for things that help us control the spectrum. We're looking for things that will help us do the day-to-day things that the Army has to address. So next generation bandages, next generation wound care, any sold boots, shoes, the Venn diagram of the things that the Army buys and needs relative to what we see emerging in the commercial marketplace, the overlap is almost complete today if you get down to the component level. And to boot, Eric's sort of a Navy guy too, so exactly the kind of person that we're looking for. Played football at the Naval Academy, right?
That's right. All right, well, before we break, I do want to point out a couple of closing things. And then, like I said, I believe there'll be lots of people around to talk to one-on-one and answer questions. First of all, just so you know, before we break, who you might go talk to, because I'm sure there'll be a long line of people that want to talk to the General and to Jay. If you are here with Army Futures Command, could you just raise your hand, because there's a whole bunch of people around the room? They're like afraid to raise their hands. Okay. They have uniforms on, so even if they're not raising their hands, you can find them. But there's a whole bunch of people here from Army Futures Command that probably aren't supposed to answer questions, but you can go corner and ask for questions. And then if you work with Capital Factory, can you raise your hand? So if you have any questions about being a member here or working here, they can answer those kind of questions. I saw Sabrina and Jonathan with Bunker Labs. So one of the things that I love about this event is I heard from a whole bunch of different people that I've never met before or heard from before that have military backgrounds, that are doing really interesting things in entrepreneurship. Sabrina and Jonathan run Bunker Labs, which you heard General Wesley refer to earlier. It's an incredible national organization, helps support veterans in getting into entrepreneurship and starting businesses. They're very, very strong here in Austin. So if you are not connected to Bunker Labs, you should definitely meet Jonathan and Sabrina and talk to them and plug into what they're doing here. Craig's also on the national board, Craig Cummings of Bunker Labs. So you should definitely be familiar with Bunker Labs. And then the last thing is I wanted to share a small gift. So Craig helped arrange this. Craig's been a key part of bringing all this together.
Well, I want to say on behalf of the entire active duty military and the veteran population, thank you. And so you know what our answers are going to be for a gift. Proper spirits. This is Tito. No kidding, Tito. It's signed. He says, "Welcome to Austin." Keep that away from Jay, by the way. We have a whole bag of Tito swag, and each of these items is under $20. And they come from multiple individuals. So we're good. We're good.
I think the bottle was a little more, so Craig drank some to reduce the value. Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's give a big round of applause for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. And like I said, this week this was the beachhead. They're here. They're on site. It's game on. They're going. And so welcome, Army Futures Command. Thanks very much.